Hi, it's Katrina. Stop everything you're doing. Archaeologists have just unearthed an astonishing discovery, a 12,000-year-old structure that is sending shockwaves through the scientific community. What was it used for? Who built it? And what does it tell us about the world at the end of the Ice Age? In this video, we are not only going to explore this groundbreaking find, but also journey through some of the world's oldest and most mysterious structures from around 12,000 years ago. Get ready for an incredible journey into the past on Origins Explained. The village out of time. In a land way before TikTok, the steam engine, and even before sliced bread, there was Mayman. Welcome to one of the oldest villages on the whole planet. This place is 12,000 years old and makes your ancestral home look like a brand new IKEA showroom. Nestled in the rocky cliffs near the modern city of Shar-e-Babak in Iran's Kerman province, Mayman isn't just old, it is biblically old. But not biblically old as in from the time of Christ 2,000 years ago. No, it's biblically old as in Garden of Eden old. I'm talking Ice Age old. Archaeologists say it's one of the first places humans decided to stop roaming around like confused GPS signals and actually settle down. And settle down they did, in hand-dug houses carved right into the cliffs. Who needs drywall when you've got granite? There are about 350 of these homes still standing today. You can take a nap in the same cliff cave where a family who hunted extinct monsters once lived. How much fun would that be? Evidence suggests some families lived in the little cliff cubbyholes for over 3,000 years. That is real estate commitment on an unprecedented level. You know what's even cooler? Around the village, there are stone engravings that are over 10,000 years old. These are some of the earliest human doodles in the margins of history. But what's unusual is that the only pottery found at the site is about 6,000 years old. This means that people carved the houses, lived in the caves, and practiced their drawings for 6,000 years before they figured out how to make pottery. Why did it take so long for our ancestors to go from DIY cave carvers to Patrick Swayze in Ghost? Could it be that their technological development was hampered by, say, a flood? In this video, you're going to see a lot of amazing places that were inhabited by early civilizations at the time of the Great Flood. You're also going to see how these places didn't see much human progress until much later. It's almost as if the people drowned, their caves were forgotten, and then when humans regrouped after the floodwaters, they returned. But it took thousands of years to recover and go back, hence the huge gap between cave carvings and making pottery. Long after the first people carved the homes of Mayman, in came the Aryan tribes of Iran in 800 BC. They revamped the place and transformed Mayman into a religious site where they worshipped everyone's favorite Persian sun god, Mithras. If you think modern sun worshippers go hard at Coachella, the Mithras crew believed the sun was invincible and the mountains were holy ground. They moved into the caves like celestial squatters. Despite being inhabited for actual millennia, the place still looks like Mother Nature hasn't noticed anyone's there. Today, Mayman looks much like it did in ancient times. It's raw, dusty, deserted, and hot. If you're ever feeling overwhelmed by modern life, go visit Mayman. No Wi-Fi, no traffic, just centuries of stone walls whispering, "We've seen it all, kid." A lost civilization in India. Sometimes the greatest discoveries are right in front of your face and you don't even know it. Once upon a time, 12,000 years ago to be precise, someone in India looked at a rock and saw a blank canvas. They covered the rock in images so profound that people are still talking about them today. I'm going to tell you something and it's going to sound perfectly normal, but there's a problem that we need to solve first. That ancient artist I just described drew a rhinoceros on a rock in Konkan, Maharashtra. It was discovered by two locals named Sudhir Rizbud and Manoj Marath. They were thrust into 15 minutes of fame because the rhino drawing was likely made by a lost civilization, one that no one had ever heard of before. Who doesn't want their time in the spotlight, even if it is for an accidental discovery? These two weren't big shot archaeologists. They were regular guys with sharp eyes and sharper instincts. But what they discovered got them really excited. One day, they found a few carvings, and next, they were launching a full-blown petroglyph hunting mission. Pretty fun, right? They even recruited help from school kids, grandmas, and everyone else in the nearby villages who had nothing going on. Together, they tracked down and documented ancient rock art in 52 villages. Only 5 of those villages even knew the carvings were there. Did you figure out what's wrong with the drawing yet? I'll give you a big clue. There are no rhinos in India. None. Which leads to the question, how did a civilization 12,000 years ago know about rhinos? They had no phones, they had no Google, they had no books on natural history. It's like someone living in Africa drawing a polar bear. There's no way they just knew such an animal existed. Scientists have 2 explanations. Either rhinos roamed India in the Ice Age, or the artists migrated from somewhere with rhinos. If they migrated, that's a whole other can of worms. Where did they come from? Were people really moving across continents 12,000 years ago? Most scientists don't think so, but the truth is probably far more complex than anyone knows. Tejas Gargi, the head of Maharashtra's archaeology department, pointed out something else about the mystery doodles. There are 0 carvings of farming. Not a single tractor, not even a hoe. What the carvings do show is a lot of hunting action and detailed animal forms, suggesting these people were the original meat and no potatoes kind of crowd. They lived off the land, tracked big creatures, and probably had a mean recipe for roasted mammoth. With the discovery of this lost civilization, scientists might have to rethink the story of early humans in South Asia. These petroglyphs challenge everything they thought they knew about ancient mobility, creativity, and cultural diversity. These people were artists, hunters, storytellers, and honestly, they were way cooler than anyone is giving them credit for. And now for a quick break because it's shout out time. I want to give a big thank you to Tabby Matthews and Andreas Rodriguez for supporting this channel. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. The first wheel. Pretend for a second that I have the voice of that old movie trailer guy. You know, the deep voice that introduced every movie of the 1990s like this.
In a world before roads, before cars, before anyone argued over pineapple on pizza, a small group of ancient humans may have accidentally invented the first wheel, or at least the first wheel-like thing.
Welcome to Nahal Ein Gev, a cozy little neighborhood near the Sea of Galilee where about 12,000 years ago, someone looked at a pebble and said, Eureka! They took a pebble and carved a hole in the middle of it. And just like that, humanity had its first taste of rotational technology. This rock with a wheel in it was the precursor to your car's wheels, your salad spinner, and your fidget spinner too. It all went down like this. Archaeologists stumbled upon a bunch of weird little donut-shaped limestone pebbles that looked like they belonged in a prehistoric bag of trail mix. At first, they figured they were beads or maybe fishing weights, but then came the brainwave. Talia Yeshuv and Lior Grossman, 2 very smart people, realized they were looking at spindle whorls. These aren't things most people know about. Spindle whorls are disc-shaped weights that help spin fibers into thread. It sounds so simple now, but it was revolutionary. Spindle whorls helped cave people clothe themselves. Pebbles might not be as interesting as other artifacts like the Ark of the Covenant or something mythological, but they are a real piece of our technological history. The first piece, maybe. Researchers 3D scanned the pebbles and printed exact replicas. Then they called Yonit Crystal, a traditional spinning expert, and handed her the replica rocks. She used them to spin flax and wool, proving these ancient pebbles worked. Even though they weren't perfectly round, they were perfectly functional, which just goes to show that perfection is overrated. So, why is this a big deal? Because it pinpoints the start of technological innovation. And when did it begin? Like everything else in this video, 12,000 years ago. We keep coming back to that number, and I can't help but feel like something major happened around that time. Was it a global flood? Scientists have no idea. What they do know is that after the spindle whorl came the potter's wheel, wagons, chariots, and then Mario Kart. These pebbles walked so the wheel could run. Do you think this might have been the first invention ever, and therefore the best? Let me know in the comments. The Prehistoric VIP Lounge. Do me a favor. Close your eyes for a second. Imagine you're standing on a sun-scorched limestone plateau in southeastern Turkey. There's a dry breeze in the air, a vast horizon stretching between the ancient Tigris and Euphrates rivers where the Bible claims fallen angels are imprisoned. And buried beneath your feet is something that will make your history teacher spit out their coffee. It's not Atlantis, it's Karahan Tepe, an 11,400-year-old prehistoric VIP lounge. I know, it's not quite 12,000 years old, but you can give me a pass for 600 years, right? This place was built by hunter-gatherers who didn't get the memo that civilization wasn't supposed to have started yet. Before farming, before cities, even before someone invented pants with zippers, these folks were out building sacred complexes and semi-permanent homes like it was HGTV Neolithic edition. Who were these people and where did they get the idea to build a city? Until recently, archaeologists thought the whole settling down and starting a society thing happened after humans got into farming. The assumption has been that humans needed wheat and goats to inspire us to stop couch surfing through the wilderness. But Karahan Tepe flipped that narrative on its carefully carved stone head. According to Professor Necmi Karul, the Indiana Jones of Turkish prehistory, this site proves that humans were building homes and ceremonial spaces while still living that rugged granola bar for dinner hunter-gatherer lifestyle. No crops, no domesticated animals. Karul said agriculture isn't the cause of civilization, it's the effect. In other words, the chicken came before the egg. You might be wondering how Karahan Tepe is different from Maymand in Iran, the 12,000-year-old village I told you about at the beginning of the video. It's different because whereas Maymand is a collection of dimples carved in a cliff, Karahan Tepe has actual temples. Karahan Tepe is home to some of the oldest known monumental structures in human history. Temples, circular rooms, altars, water channels. They constructed sacred and secular spaces at the same time. These were people who went from living in a cave to building monoliths that reached for the sky. And they even built monuments to what the experts suspect were the first gods in the world. And what did those gods want? They wanted a gigantic phallic statue, apparently. Deep within a chamber of Karahan Tepe, archaeologists found 11 massive phallic monuments carved straight out of the bedrock. Overseeing this stony sausage fest is a bearded head with a serpent body emerging from the wall. This is one of the craziest places on the planet. A stone phallic garden complete with a human-serpent hybrid like Satan from the Garden of Eden. Karul suspects the room was used for rites of passage, possibly for men coming into adulthood. But that's only a guess. No one can say for certain what was going on in this dark chamber so long ago. The only thing we do know is that the builders weren't simple-minded nomads. They were architects and cultists. So what happened to those dumb cavemen our high school teachers told us about? These sure weren't them. And yes, for those who know about this subject already, Göbekli Tepe is a few miles down the road from Karahan Tepe, but it's hogged the limelight as the world's oldest temple party for too long. Both of these places were from the same age, probably even built by the same mysterious civilization. Has anyone watching ever visited any of these sites? I would love to hear from anyone who's seen Karahan Tepe or Göbekli Tepe in real life. If you have, let me know in the comments. Europe's oldest megastructure. Something fishy is going on. Beneath the icy waters of the Baltic Sea, hidden for millennia in the quiet depths, lies Europe's oldest megastructure. It's an eerie, almost 1 mile long stone wall built not by modern hands, but by mysterious Stone Age hunters. You guessed it, 12,000 years ago. In the fall of 2021, a group of researchers from Kiel University went diving off the coast of northern Germany. Their original goal was to study manganese crusts on the sea floor. You know, regular, boring science stuff. But instead of crusts, they found rocks. Rocks that were in a straight line. If you know anything about Mother Nature, is that she doesn't usually build things in straight lines. So it looked like a sunken wall. This wall is composed of about 1,500 football-sized stones strung together like someone was trying to build the world's most inconvenient garden fence underwater. Located about 70 feet below the surface in the Mecklenburg Bight, this wall is defying conventional ideas. After ruling out natural causes, scientists came to a mind-blowing conclusion. They declared the wall was likely a reindeer hunting trap built by very determined Stone Age humans at the end of the Ice Age. How many people do you suppose lived in Europe 12,000 years ago? I'll give you a hint. It wasn't a lot, not even close to today's population. Those early humans didn't just sit around waiting for dinner to wander by. They built strategic megastructures out of stones to guide reindeer herds into choke points between the wall and nearby lakes, where they could then ambush them with stone weapons. When you've got no metal, no tractors, and no grocery store, you have to get innovative. The lead researcher, Jacob Gearson, definitely did not expect to find Ice Age reindeer traffic control at the bottom of the sea. There's still the little problem of it being underwater. Scientists say it was originally built on dry land, long before post-Ice Age melting turned this area into an underwater ghost town. As glaciers retreated and sea levels rose around 8,500 years ago, large swaths of landscape were swallowed by the sea and forgotten. Until now. It almost sounds like a flood swept through the area, doesn't it? Maybe a flood of biblical proportions, one that hit reset on human civilization. The spookiest part is that there are no known settlements near the wall. Either everything else was washed away, or there was nothing else around. I don't know. The mystery is far from over. It's starting to look like the deepest secrets of humanity's origin are buried deep in the sea and at the bottom of Europe's murky lakes. What do you suppose is hiding down there? The first great shaman. Wait a minute, who is this? Deep in the dusty hills of southeastern Turkey, where the Tigris River snakes through ancient stone and silence, archaeologists cracked open a tomb from 12,000 years ago. Same time Karahan Tepe was built just up the street. The tomb yielded the decaying remains of someone who may have been the first shaman in the world. And she was a lady. The burial was found at the site of Semka Huyuk. The shaman was buried beneath a mud brick floor along with the bones of wild beasts and birds. The woman herself was around 25 to 30 years old at her time of death. The initial autopsy showed she died from natural causes. Natural causes at 25? Humans really have come a long way with our lifespans. The shaman was buried in the fetal position with a giant limestone slab that sealed her grave, like the door of a pharaoh's tomb. Next to her bone was an aurochs skull, belonging to a huge wild ancestor of modern cattle. It was found perched above her like some kind of Stone Age guardian spirit. The aurochs jawbone was detached and placed at her feet. She was also buried with a partridge wing, a marten's leg, and bits of goat or sheep. She had quite the zoo to keep her company in the afterlife. Lead archaeologist Ergul Kodas of Mardin Artuklu University thinks the animal parts are a spiritual statement. Since domesticated animals weren't around yet, all these bones came from wild animals. Someone went full Bear Grylls to collect them. The aurochs in particular was a huge and majestic beast that would not have been easy to slay. The symbolic mix of wings, legs, jaws, and wild creatures suggests the woman may have been a shaman, a spiritual leader with one foot in the world of humans and the other in the animal kingdom, like a prehistoric Dr. Dolittle. This isn't just a neat find, it's a spiritual mic drop from the dawn of civilization. It challenges old-school assumptions that early belief systems were dominated by males. This woman was buried like she mattered. Never before has a woman from this long ago been found in such an impressive grave. For crying out loud, this woman was buried with all the trappings of a pharaoh 8,000 years before there were pharaohs. Let that sink in for a minute. The forgotten mines of Mexico. Long before social media, a powerful obsession drew people into darkness. 12,000 years ago, on the sun-drenched coastlines of what is now Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, someone crawled into a pitch-black cave armed with a torch and a dream. And obviously no fear of the creepy crawlies that live in caves. Their dream: harvest red dirt. Not just any dirt, ochre, the ancient world's favorite multi-purpose wonder pigment. You could use it to decorate your body, paint your cave, honor your dead, or just show everyone that you had taste. Ochre was so important that prehistoric people risked their necks squeezing through miles of jagged underground tunnels to get it. In the eerie, flooded caves near Quintana Roo, now famous for Instagrammable cenotes and less famous underwater panic attacks, divers have discovered what may be the oldest known mine in the Americas. According to Ed Reinhardt, expert diver and micropaleontologist, the caves are like a time capsule, one that includes skeletons, prehistoric digging tools, and ancient fireplaces. These ancient sites were actively mined from 12,000 to 10,000 years ago. That is 2 millennia of crawling into claustrophobic caverns to dig red powder out of the walls. It makes your 9 to 5 at the burger shack look easy peasy. But why would people risk cave collapses, getting lost in total darkness, and bats? They risked it for the biscuit. They needed the red ochre for their religious rituals. With a flickering flame and the complete blackness to see by, their hands stained blood red with pigment, the ancient workers struck the cave walls with tools carved from the earth. Then they carried the sacred ochre like treasure through tight tunnels, back to a world of sunlight and sky. Then they stopped. They just gave up. Around 10,000 years ago, these cave miners packed it up and left. Why? No one knows. The caves were still dry and accessible. They could have kept mining. Maybe they found better deposits, or maybe something freaked them out, or maybe they were washed away in a flood. Shortly after the site was abandoned, the ocean rolled in and turned the whole operation into an Atlantis of twisting tunnels and soaked bones. It's enough to give you the chills, and there's still more to be uncovered. Mexico's Yucatan region has over 1,000 miles of underwater cave systems, most of them still unexplored. So yeah, it's entirely possible there are more mines, more relics, and more roots of human civilization waiting to be found. The earliest and creepiest instruments. What did music sound like 12,000 years ago? You might be surprised. 12,000 years ago, people were already developing wheel technology, building stone sausage parties, constructing temples, following shamans, and trapping reindeer. Would you be surprised if I said they were playing instruments too? 12,000 years ago, in the Levant, somewhere in a Natufian village, someone sat tooting on a bird bone like it was open mic night and they just finished their recorder lessons. But what did this ancient instrument sound like? Beautiful melodies? Peaceful fluting? Nope. According to new research, the instrument sounded like a horrible screech. Maybe not as bad as the Aztec death whistle, but still bad. Researchers think it was designed to mimic the piercing cry of a raptor, as in the bird of prey, not a velociraptor from Jurassic Park. Scientists at the archaeological site of Einan Malaha in modern-day Israel found 7 ancient flutes known as aerophones. They were made from the wing bones of small waterfowl. The researchers who studied the site almost missed them. They were facing 1,100 bird bones buried deep in the dirt like a mass grave for pigeons. As they studied the bones, they noticed some were deliberately perforated, worn down, and shaped into flutes. Then, when they reconstructed the instruments and played them, they were pretty shocked. They were expecting soft, calming pan flute vibes. Instead, they got hawk shrieks, loud, sharp, high-pitched blasts that could wake the dead. Now, no one left behind a user manual for these instruments, but archaeologists have some ideas. One theory is that the 12,000-year-old culture of the Natufians used these flutes for hunting, like the world's first duck calls. But that's a shaky theory. Another possibility is that the instruments were used in rituals, maybe for summoning bird spirits, maybe for warding off spirits. Either way, some sort of magical juju was going on. It's not necessarily what the instruments were for that's impressive, it's the fact they were built at all. People in 10,000 BC really knew how to modify bones to make specific animal noises. It's really good tech for the time. What's especially interesting is that the Natufians chose small, screech-prone bones over larger, better-sounding ones. They clearly weren't trying to serenade anyone. They wanted screeching flutes that sounded like the howl of a banshee. According to scientists, this find doesn't just show that humans were making music, it shows that music was already becoming specialized and part of a growing cultural web. This is proof that society 12,000 years ago was way ahead of where our textbooks say they were. The impossible sunken city. Something insane is hiding in the ocean and experts are completely ignoring it. Off the coast of Louisiana, where the Gulf of Mexico laps lazily against the uninhabited Chandeleur Islands, something strange lies beneath the waves. It's not a sunken shrimp boat. It's not the lost city of SpongeBob. It's something weirder, something older. something that might be a 12,000-year-old underwater metropolis. Before you roll your eyes and say, sure, whatever, Bigfoot built it, hold on to your snorkel, you have to meet George Galley, retired architect, self-proclaimed amateur archaeologist, and full-time granite enthusiast. For nearly 50 years, this man has been chasing a theory that sounds straight out of a History Channel fever dream. His theory is that there's a sunken prehistoric city out there in the Gulf, older than the Inca, the Maya, the Egyptians, and all the rest. He calls the city Crescentis, which sounds like a new sci-fi series, but is supposedly a city complete with a pyramid. Because of course there's a pyramid! Ancient underwater cities without pyramids are just wet rocks. Mainstream archaeologists aren't backing up Galley's claim despite some very interesting proof form of granite. Local fishermen have been pulling up random square chunks of granite in their nests for years with no explanation. Granite doesn't naturally exist in the area. Either someone long ago put it there, or Mother Nature is pulling a brutal prank on us. Local fishermen have also reported compasses going haywire and weird electromagnetic activity near the site, which either means ancient alien tech is real, or there is a very grumpy electric eel down there with extra juice. George also has visual proof in the form of sonar images, which he swears show huge ruins. But not everyone believes in the images. Some experts squint at the scans and say, that's just some funny-shaped geology, buddy. Others propose more grounded explanations, like maybe the granite came from old shipwrecks or was dumped during a 1940s coral reef project that never made it into the history books. Still, Galley insists that what he has found is far too organized and too intentional to be a random pile of sea junk. And what's extra weird about it is that the academic crowd hasn't outright laughed Galley out of the Gulf. Normally they ridicule these types of ideas straight into oblivion, but it's like there's a shred of hope that this city is real. Rob Mann, a professor of archaeology, says we shouldn't jump to conclusions, but we also shouldn't ignore the weirdness. He suggests scholars dig into old maps, shipping records, and newspapers. Something funny is going on off the coast of Louisiana. But is it an underwater city? And if it is, who built it? An Anunnaki tomb in Iran. The only thing more shocking than a city at the bottom of the ocean is a tomb belonging to a real Anunnaki alien god. In a dusty Iranian desert, the sun beating down like it's trying to bake the earth into pita bread, a bunch of archaeologists brush sand off a 12,000-year-old tomb, one that apparently belongs to an Anunnaki, one of those mysterious, potentially extraterrestrial giants who came down from the stars to jumpstart civilization. According to Sumerian mythology and some very excitable YouTubers, Anunnaki were massive, brainy beings from outer space. They came to Earth with one goal: to mine gold. Their plan was to combine their DNA with ours to create human slaves. Up until now, there has been no evidence that the Anunnaki are real, but with the reports of this mystery tomb, lost since the Ice Age, things are changing. Inside were supposedly the remains of an inhuman being. Its bones were too big, too weird, and too oddly shaped to be human. Plus, there were some strange metal artifacts in the grave that looked like something Iron Man might have left behind after a camping trip. Not to mention, the grave was filled with pottery decorated with etchings eerily similar to Sumerian depictions of Anunnaki. Dr. Kamran Fayyad, one of the lead archaeologists on the team, reportedly said, "We've never seen anything like this. Either it's an advanced lost civilization or someone seriously messed up their Halloween costume 12,000 years ago. Unfortunately, this could all be a hoax, a lie, or some absurd AI drama." The discovery of the Anunnaki tomb has not been reported by mainstream news media, nor has it appeared in any scientific journals. DNA testing is supposedly underway, but there's no information about which institute is performing the tests. Everything is a little too mysterious to be taken at face value. But that's not to say the discovery is fake. If this tomb turns out to be legit proof of extraterrestrial visitation, we're going to have to ask ourselves some uncomfortable questions. Scientists are on this case like conspiracy theorists on a blurry UFO photo. Analysis continues. More tombs might be found. There's no telling what's buried out there under the hot sands of Iran. It's not exactly a place that welcomes archaeologists with open arms. And you have to think, there's so much sand. An entire Anunnaki Valley of the Kings could be out there somewhere and nobody would know. Until scientists confirm the existence of this tomb, the discovery will go on fueling enough Reddit threads, podcast episodes, and Facebook comments to keep us all entertained for years. Because nothing says existential crisis like finding out your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-granddad might have had 6 fingers and a spaceship. Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. The Golden Mummy. The Golden Boy mummy was found at a cemetery in southern Egypt in 1916. It got its nickname because of the unbelievable wealth the boy was buried with. His head mask was gilded in gold. The mummy was hidden inside of 2 coffins instead of 1, and he had more treasure than a boy could ever ask for. After his discovery, he was transferred to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, where he was stored in the basement. It was only recently that researchers took a renewed interest in the boy mummy and decided to do computed tomography scans. Based on the results of the CT scans and by looking at his teeth, researchers identified the boy as being between 14 and 15 when he died 2,000 years ago. They say that because his wisdom teeth had never come in, he likely hadn't grown to adulthood. But the truly shocking discovery was that the Golden Boy had a hidden 49 amulets stashed on and inside of his body. What's even more bizarre is that whoever buried him also stuffed him full of gold. A golden heart scarab was placed inside his thoracic cavity, and a golden tongue was found in his mouth. Sahar Salim from Cairo University says the mummy is an amazing showcase of the Egyptian belief system during the Ptolemaic period. The boy must have been someone of extremely high status, from a family who could afford to bury him with the best. The amulets were placed in his coffin to protect him from supernatural evils, and he was given a gold tongue so that he could speak with the gods in the afterlife. He was even buried with a pair of expensive sandals so that he could walk out of his tomb once he passed on to the other side. Cambrian mystery. Animals living in the ocean conducted an experiment in evolution 500 million years ago. This was when creatures went from being squishy, tube-like organisms to having skeletons. Invertebrates that resembled living plants growing on the seafloor started to develop bone-like structures. It was one of the greatest evolutionary leaps in the history of life on Earth. However, not many of these early organisms have been found, making them a huge mystery to scientists. But recently, in China, some of them have been identified, and they date from between 541 and 510 million years ago. These are calcium-reinforced skeleton tubes from the Cambrian explosion. Scientists studying these bizarre remains have found that for a span of about 50 million years, multiple groups of animals suddenly evolved to have hard skeletons. You can thank these creatures for all the bones you have in your body today. These strange creatures found in China have been identified as a species of tube-dwelling animal called Gangtucunia aspera. Researchers were shocked when they realized the animal was a skeletal jellyfish. It was a soft-bodied invertebrate with a ring of tentacles around its mouth. The jellyfish only measured a few fractions of an inch, but still, it looks like it's one of the first animals ever to experiment with a bone structure. The elephant on Mars. A strange and very unusual creature may have just been discovered on another planet. According to UFO hunters, specifically self-proclaimed alien researcher Scott Waring, an elephant-like animal has been sighted on Mars. Scott says he was studying an image of the red planet when he noticed something shocking between some rock formations. The picture itself came from NASA and is public for everyone to look at. Scott was analyzing the official photographs when he came across what he says. The statue appears to show the animal sitting with its head turned slightly to the left. It looks like it has thick lips and bulging eyes, and it seems to have a round nose and an elephant trunk. Scott says the statue is irrefutable proof that life on Mars did exist at one time, perhaps not that long ago. However, not everyone is convinced. Experts say the supposed statue is nothing but a rock formation, and that people just see what they want to see. Keep in mind, Scott Waring also once claimed that he found a monkey sitting on the surface of Mars, and then he bashed biologists for not investigating. While it's possible that there could be animal sculptures on Mars crafted by aliens thousands of years ago, NASA has never officially confirmed it. So as far as mainstream science is concerned, there has never been any undeniable proof of life found on the surface of Mars, never mind a statue of an elephant monster. The unicorn blind fish. In the dark waters of a creepy Chinese cave, an extremely bizarre fish species has been discovered. Researchers are calling it a unicorn blind fish. These freakish creatures live in the black pools at the bottom of a remote Chinese cave and aren't like anything seen in the outside world. The fish has no scales, it doesn't have any kind of color, and its eyes are completely useless. But perhaps the weirdest thing about them is that each fish has a horn sticking out from its forehead. Researchers came across these unbelievable animals while surveying a cave in the mountains of Guizhou province. Scientists call it a case of regressive evolution. The fish still has eyes because at one point it didn't live in total darkness. It was likely a fish that lived in the sea, but through geological shifts, it found itself stuck in tiny pools of water underneath a mountain. Then, as its eyes began to fade and its color was lost, it started growing a horn for some unknown reason. Not too much else is known about these bizarre blind fish, but researchers are hoping to analyze its DNA to find out more about it in the near future. A new planet. Scientists have just discovered a world very similar to our own. Using data compiled by NASA's Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite, or TESS, scientists identified planet TOI 700e, which appears to be orbiting the habitable zone of its star. Earth is also located in the habitable zone of our solar system, close enough to the sun to be warm for liquid water to occur naturally. But if we were any further away from the sun, it would be too cold for liquid water, and if we were any closer, it would be too hot. The habitable zone is sometimes called the Goldilocks zone because it's perfect for the development of life, not too hot and not too cold. Planet TOI 700e is roughly 95% the size of Earth and appears to be mostly rocky. But here's where things get even more amazing. Emily Gilbert from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Southern California says the TOI 700 system is remarkable, as there is not just one planet in the habitable zone, but several. TOI 700e is just the most recent one to be discovered, but planets B, C, and D are also in the sweet spot where life can occur. Imagine that instead of Mars being our neighbor, we had two other planets of almost identical size. It would mean that human beings could inhabit two other planets with relative ease. Unfortunately, star system TOI 700 is 100 light-years away, and it's not a place we're going to reach anytime soon for colonization. And now for number 10. But first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Ricky Workman and Rocky Adkins for supporting this channel. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family, because why not? The Gao Chang Observatory. The Gao Chang Astronomical Observatory is believed to be one of the oldest observatories of ancient China. We don't know all there is to know about it, but historians believe it was built around 1042 BC. It's believed that the Duke of Zhou had the observatory constructed for his royal astronomers to better observe the sun. Back then, the Duke thought the Henan province, the area where the observatory stands now, was located at the center of heaven and earth. The structure standing today, however, isn't the same one that was built 3,000 years ago. In 1276 AD, Kublai Khan ordered a great observatory to be built that could observe the movements of the sun and the stars, as well as record time. It was an immense creation and may have been built right on top of the original observatory. It was from here that ancient Chinese scientists calculated the length of the year to 365 days. They did this a whopping 300 years before Europeans had even started thinking about coming up with the Gregorian calendar. Mystery signal from space. Scientists recently captured a signal that originated 9 billion light-years away from our planet. Astronomers had a difficult time wrapping their heads around the discovery because it was so shocking. The radio signal came from an ancient galaxy so far away that it takes approximately 8.8 billion years for the light it produces to reach us. What that means is that the radio signal we received is almost 9 billion years old, twice as old as our own planet. It was emitted at a time when our solar system hadn't even materialized yet. It took the entire formation of our star system and the evolution of every animal in the world before the signal finally got within range. Scientists say it's now the most distant signal of its kind ever picked up by human technology. It was discovered by the Giant Meter Wave Radio Telescope in India. But just what in the world made this signal? Could it have been an extraterrestrial society that existed in the first few years of the creation of the universe? According to scientists, it's not very likely. Researchers from India believe the signal came from gaseous hydrogen and that it was emitted by a cluster of hydrogen atoms. But unfortunately, there is no way of knowing what this distant galaxy looks like today. If the signal was sent 8 billion years ago, chances are the galaxy was already swallowed by a black hole. However, just because the signal wasn't made by aliens doesn't mean we won't pick up an alien signal in the future. Many scientists believe that if there was an advanced civilization, they likely evolved many billions of years ago, far away from us, meaning their signals may not have reached us yet. Egypt's oldest mummy. Archaeologists have discovered what they say could be the oldest Egyptian mummy ever. It's 4,300 years old and was uncovered at the bottom of a deep shaft near the mysterious step pyramid of Djoser. The tomb and the pyramids are inside the ancient necropolis of Saqqara, one of the most important sites in Egypt. Excavation leader Zahi Hawass, who happens to be a world-renowned Egyptologist, says the mummy was once a man named Hekashepes. His remains were discovered inside a limestone coffin that was sealed tightly with mortar. So far, it appears to be one of the oldest and most complete mummies ever uncovered in Egypt. Archaeologists know that he lived during the reign of the last pharaoh in the 5th dynasty, but it's not exactly clear who Hekashepes was. He doesn't seem to have had any royal connections, so he may have just been an ordinary person with enough cash to go through the mummification process. They also found other mummies nearby, including those of a high priest, a judge, and a senior official. It was a truly incredible discovery because all the mummies were identified by name. That's pretty great for historians. You had the high priest, the judge, and the senior official. All their tombs were decorated in murals and hieroglyphics, and each one was filled with a small assortment of tablets and statues. Skull on the beach. A woman named Emily Stevenson discovered the remains of a human skull on a beach in the United Kingdom. Emily is the co-founder for the environmental group called Beach Guardians, and she was cleaning the shoreline of Cornwall, England, when she came across a human head. Probably not a great way to start the day. At first, the unexpected discovery was investigated by the local police. What if it was a homicide? However, they soon realized the skull wasn't from any modern person. It likely came from somebody who lived centuries ago. The skull had been on the beach for an untold number of years, and it may have belonged to a shipwreck victim. The Cornwall Council released a statement saying it's not that unusual to find human remains along the English coastline. Many people in centuries past were buried on the beach by seaside communities. This was especially true when there was a shipwreck and the victims washed ashore. When locals found the deceased sailors, there wasn't usually any way to identify them, and so they would bury them right there in the sand of the beach. The skull could have come from anyone. It could have been an explorer, a shipwreck victim, or even someone from a local community. However, because it's several hundred years old, there's a chance we'll never find out the truth. Arthur's Stone. Arthur's Stone is an ancient and mysterious Neolithic burial site located high above the Golden Valley in Herefordshire, England. Old stones that were left behind by the early Neolithic people of Britain thousands of years ago were discovered up on the hill, and in the distance rises the beautiful Black Mountains of Wales. Archaeologists have been digging at the site for years, but in their most recent season they found some truly fascinating things. It was here that archaeologists unearthed the steps leading to a 5,000-year-old tomb. They also uncovered primitive tools that were likely created by the first humans to ever farm this part of Britain. The research team used drones to pinpoint nearby burial spots in the general vicinity of Arthur's Stone. They believe this site was a lot like Stonehenge in the past. an important meeting place and the center of a ritualistic community of Neolithic farmers. Archaeology professor Julian Thomas called it one of the most wonderful yet poorly understood ancient monuments in Britain. The reason it's called Arthur's Stone is because of the legend that connects it with the mythical King Arthur. According to legends, Arthur supposedly killed a giant on the very spot where the tomb is today. Indentations on the tomb's capstone were allegedly made by the giant's elbows as it toppled over. And while we can't say whether that truly happened or not, the tomb itself is real enough. Scientists say Arthur's Stone was occupied by the very last hunter-gatherers as they made the transition to a life of farming. The Laguna Copper Plate Inscription. The Laguna Copper Plate Inscription is a legal document that dates back all the way to 900 AD and is the earliest known written document in the Philippines. During the 10th century, scholars generally believed the Philippines were isolated from most of Southeast Asia. There was the Khmer Empire, which controlled the mainland, and the seas were mostly controlled by the Srivijaya, a maritime empire in the region. There were others, but we don't have enough time in this video. But there was no mention of the Philippines until the Laguna Copper Plate Inscription, or LCI for short. The LCI was the one artifact found that made scholars re-evaluate the relationship between the Philippines and the rest of Asia. It reveals the influence of Hindu culture and names several towns and indicates there were interactions between the islands and the empire way before we originally thought. The copper plate was found during a dredging project by a laborer. Even though he tried to sell it several times, no one seemed to care until finally the Philippine National Museum finally bought it and an anthropologist started to translate. There are supposed to be more of these copper plates that were lost. So if you are in the Philippines, keep an eye out. Rat-eating pitcher plant. What could be cooler than a carnivorous jungle plant? Scientists recently discovered this new species of pitcher plant on the face of Mount Victoria in the Philippines. It also happens to be one of the largest carnivorous plants ever discovered, with a big bowl of death. It has been named Nepenthes attenborough after the famous naturalist and TV personality Sir David Attenborough. As you can tell from the name, it specializes in rats. The plant can lure these rats in with their sweet nectar scent, and when the rat comes near enough to drink the plant's liquid, it gets stuck in the gooey sap instead. Once the rat is trapped, acid-like digestive enzymes break down the rat slowly to be consumed by the plant. It's like a monster out of a horror story, and it's just as gruesome as it sounds. Just another example that nature is pretty scary. Skeleton in the driveway. A man named Bertie Curry was doing some work on his land where he owned a bar in Northern Ireland. He was trying to make a driveway, but instead found himself looking at some human bones. He immediately called the police, and they were able to determine that luckily, he wasn't sitting on a murder scene because the bones were much older. Archaeologists were called in and they found something they didn't expect. The bones that Curry had found were extremely old. In fact, they were older than the Celts that had landed in Ireland over 1,000 years ago, if not more. Why is this significant? Well, common belief is that the original Celts made it to Ireland from Britain between 1000 and 500 BC. But the bones found were from around 2000 BC, which changes the history of the nations in many ways. This has caused many people to argue about what the finding of these bones actually means. Does this mean that the first inhabitants weren't from Britain? Are our timetables all wrong? What is the story behind this person? Until other similar remains are found, it is very hard to tell. Rat Kings. The Rat Kings are a rare phenomenon from the animal kingdom that is so bizarre, no one is entirely sure how it happens. You may have seen one before, but if you haven't, they really are something quite unusual. They have been a part of legend for centuries and are formed when a number of rats become attached by the tail. This is actually a real thing. With all these tails becoming entangled, the rats lose their ability to move independently and die a slow and painful death. It's not really a royal king-like event, but more like a ball of complete suffering. This only happens with one species, the black rat, but apparently it sometimes happens with other animals, such as squirrels. Despite being written about a lot, only a few examples have ever been found. Science can't explain this though, because the behavior or the tail entanglement has never been documented in rats. Perhaps it's a birth defect, or something that happens in cold temperatures to share warmth. Other possibilities are that it happens due to adhesive liquids, or a sticky substance formed by a rat's skin. In any case, it makes no sense. The Ulfart Swords. Ulfart swords were the weapon of choice of the Vikings, along with other tribes around northern Europe. They had a long, double-edged blade and a straight crossbar over the grip. There are only about 170 still known to exist today, each of which dates to between the 9th and 11th centuries. And the cool thing is, they have the telltale inscription in the blade itself. Said to be stronger, sharper, and better than any other sword at the time, they were owned by the wealthier members of society and came with a hefty price tag, about the equivalent of up to $24,000 in today's prices. The name itself of Ulfart is a form of early trademark, signaling that the sword was made in a certain way. Interestingly, they were all formed with varying methods, but the most surprising thing about them is the composition of the metal. The trick to making a good sword is perfecting the amount of carbon in the blade. If there is too much carbon mixed with the iron, the swords will break, but not adding enough meant the sword would bend. The Ulfart swords were the perfect blend, and it's not entirely clear how they managed this. It truly was a science hundreds of years ahead of its time, and it was only until the Industrial Revolution came around that it could be replicated. To this day, by using the production methods that they had at the time, no one knows how the Ulfart blacksmiths were able to craft such impressive weapons. Thanks for watching! Would you rather discover an ancient Egyptian tomb or a completely new animal species? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!